Okay, so today I have Mr. James Holloway on the podcast with us. And James is a wholesale business development expert by any measure and has an incredibly impressive resume working with companies like Revolution Parts, Summit Consulting, Mercedes-Benz on the dealer side, and many more over the course of a very successful career. So, James, thank you for being here and welcome.
Hey, thank you, Joe. It's my pleasure, and I'm happy to be here. Very happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited because, for anyone who follows my work, you most likely know who James is, and you know that he puts a lot of effort into, just like I do, creating content around the business. And one of his slogans is "We're all in this together," right?
That's right. That's right. And when everyone is on the same page and we're all here to help each other, great things can happen.
Agreed. So, I before we get started, so you have sort of 4 or 5 things or tips for us today that can help us sort of develop our wholesale businesses. But first, just want to ask you a few questions. How did you get started in this parts business?
Well, that's a great question. It was when you're in high school, you're faced with all these decisions on what am I going to do after high school, or what is my career path going to be. And I actually kind of fell into it. And while I was still working in high school, of course, I had a side job, and that side job involved working at at the automotive department / sporting goods department of a department store. And I found very early on that I enjoyed helping people procure or specify replacement parts that we just happened to sell. We had a shop outside, I don't know, 4 or 5 days where we sold oil changes and tires and things like that. So that's kind of like how I got my foothold into it.
Yeah.
And, I decided I liked it. And the part of it that I liked wasn't so much that it was automotive, it was people. And if anybody asks me today, I will say this, and this is like one of my favorite sayings, is like, we don't work in the automotive business, we work in the people business.
Yeah.
And for me, that kind of just aligns right in with wholesale. And you're going to hear me talk about that later on in the podcast, about how important, relationships are, and it's the very pinnacle of the wholesale business. But going back to how I got started, I mean, that it kind of grew from there. Graduated from high school and went right into the workforce. Worked full time at I guess you'll call it a do-it-yourself, like an AutoZone type company.
Sure.
Did that for five years. Learned the business side of it, in terms of not just selling parts, or stock order replenishment, but how to deal with on the administrative side, hiring, human resources, things like that.
Sure.
And looking back, it's like, I literally, I'm so thankful to be where I am today. It's been a great career, but going back, eventually the path that I was on led me to go to work at an OEM new car franchise dealership. And it was the first time, to me, parts are parts, whether they're aftermarket, whether they're OEM or used.
Yeah.
And
was that Mercedes?
And that was Mercedes. Yeah. And, I've never really worked with any other brand. That's not true. I mean, I worked with Volkswagen. I worked for the OEM Volkswagen, both German, both did things a little bit differently from the other one, but, one's more of a mainstream mark and the other one is obviously Highline.
Yeah.
But man, so many stories and so many success stories. And I will tell you, it's always been about the customer, or about the people, whether they were vendors or colleagues or draw. So.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And we talked about this before, but I got started in almost a very similar way. And what I found was that it really didn't have anything to do with the fact that it was parts. I think it probably could have been anything, but it was the people side helping people sort of decipher and look through. One of the things I used to really love, and I still do, I just obviously in my current position don't do it as much, but just reviewing schematics with customers and helping them identify, first of all, how something might be taken apart or how it might be put back together and what things and components and pieces you'll need. I always found that fascinating, and it was stimulating, and I think that's what actually drew me to it, because I was really helping people and it was very stimulating. And of course, just like you, that kind of spiraled into going into the dealer side and really just developing from there.
Yeah. And I can tell you, there was a time at the dealership that I worked at where our growth was literally like trying to hold on to a rocket ship. And it was unprecedented growth, and just managing that was, I can tell you, we went from being a very small corner mom and pop car dealership to one of the leading, we used to call it the Taj Mahal, this new dealership that we moved into back in 2003. And of course, that was before, the recession. So, you know how the recession went, what goes up must come down.
Of course.
But I can tell you, personally, my parts department, when I took over from the assistant parts manager as a parts manager, I think I had 5 employees, including myself. And then towards right before the recession hit, we were up to like 25 people in the parts department. We were hitting over $1 million a month.
That's huge.
Yeah. And
totally different business at that.
Yeah. It is. And you're obviously not working the counter, right? If you have to, you will. Of course, obviously we do that. But when you're pushing out that kind of business, you have to have systems and processes and people in place to make sure it gets done. And if somebody doesn't show up, then the show must go on. So
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome. It sounds like we had very similar ways of getting into it. And, that story of coming into a dealership, it's very small, and being a part of inducing some huge growth. I think that's what people are searching for. They want to be a part of something that is going somewhere. And I think that, this conversation in particular that we're going to have today is going to help them get there on their wholesale business side. So I guess that sort of leads into my next question, which is, from your perspective, why is it important that we focus on our wholesale parts business?
If you look at it just straight on, it's a revenue stream. And when you look at the business, it's more, when I say the business, I'm talking about the car business and working at a dealership. You have all these departments, whether it's new car, used car, F&I, service department, parts department. Those are all departments that generate revenue, and they are right now more than ever. They are every department has to pull their own, so to speak.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I'm talking about growth. And parts is no exception. So I remember looking at my business as a 3 or 4-legged stool, right? And one of the legs of that stool, obviously, is my service department. And one of my favorite sayings is that, you know what? If your service department is breaking records, so are you. Right. If your service department is not breaking records, neither are you, right? and so, you're looking and you're saying, okay, well, what other revenue streams or what other legs to the stool can I have that will, funnel in through the parts department?
Right.
And of course, you and I, we're in the parts business. We don't sell labor. The service manager sells time. That is the only inventory that they have to sell is time.
Sure.
But the thing is that, the number of cars on the road today are at a record high, 11.6 years old. So people that are, people that actually buy cars versus the people that lease cars, they hold on to them for a very, very long time now more than ever. And
Oh yeah.
the great thing about that is that, the older a car gets, the more demand for parts, replacement parts is going to take place.
Right. Yeah.
So, it's not a good idea, at least me personally speaking. I never really liked having all my eggs in one basket with the service department. So, of course, we had a body shop, right? And I remember my GM at the time, I'd always talk about wholesale. And he looked at me, he's like, "Oh, you mean our body shop?" And I was like, "No, our wholesale." I was like, if the car, and I remember explaining to him, "Mr. General Manager, if the car doesn't show up on our service drive, we don't get the part sale or the labor sale, but it's going across the street to, what some people may view as our competitor. But guess what? That competitor will buy parts from you to fix that car because the car didn't show up here. And the reason why the car didn't show up at the dealership is usually we found out that warranty is the primary driver of traffic across the service drive. So once that car is out of warranty, if it's an Asian or a domestic OEM, 3 years, 36,000 miles, we're never going to see them after that. If it's a luxury brand, 4 years, 50,000, we're probably not going to see them after that time period is up, right? So then, what happens is that I still have a really good shot of selling the part, even though the service manager has no hopes of selling labor because the car's not there.
Yeah, you bring up such a good point, which is that just because we're not capturing it from our own service drive doesn't mean that we have to not capture the parts sale either. And I think that's kind of a fundamental concept to understand. Especially if you're talking to your dealer principal and he doesn't really understand why you're wanting to develop that business so much.
Well, correct. And I think I said this once before. If I'm sitting in front of a dealer operator or a general manager or whoever it is, and I put $100 bill on that table, I would challenge them. Can you tell me what department that $100 bill came from? Did it come from the new car department? Did it come from service department? Did it come from F&I? The answer is it doesn't matter where it came from. Money is money, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and the other thing is that I've heard so many, people would say, "Why would I do wholesale? I got to work I got to work twice as hard for half the money." And the truth of the matter is that, well, you know what? If they don't buy it from you, they're going to buy it somewhere else.
Yes, they will. And your competitor will happily sell it.
Absolutely. And you know what? I'll say it once, I'll say it again. You and I and whoever's listening, we are in the parts business and we're here to sell parts. And I don't care where that money comes from. I have the part. I want to sell it. I don't think you do either. I don't want to be the curator of the auto parts museum where parts sit and they collect dust, and that's money tied up. That's the dealer's money that we only have that part there because it's met specific phasing criteria. There's activity. The only reason why we even have that part there is because there's a very high likelihood that we're going to sell that part again.
Exactly.
So, right. And that's how we grow our business, and that's how we grow our profits. And that's how we, so it's all about getting our fair share of the market, and it's an extremely competitive business, but it's a profitable business, right? So there's all different ways you can slice it and dice it. One of the things I will say is that when you talk about wholesale, remember there's two segments to this monster. You have collision and you have mechanical, and those are, two totally separate customers, two totally separate sets of needs and expectations that have to be met.
Sure.
We can get into that later. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I think the takeaway that I'm getting from this is, if a customer came into your dealership and he purchased a car, and now you're 3 years down the line, he's out of warranty. That customer is looking for a cost-effective way to keep that vehicle in good condition. And generally speaking, there's all sorts of reasons for this, but generally speaking, the dealership is not going to be the most cost-effective route. It might be the best quality route. And there's probably a difference between a customer who's in Highline and a customer who is in domestic, right? But I would imagine that, at least when I was in Highline, so I worked with Lexus and BMW for a good bit of time. And what I found was we had some very, very loyal customers that no matter what, they came to the dealership. But our competitors were specializing in import in Highline. They were saying, hey, we work on just BMWs and we do it better than the dealership for half the price. So that's now I also got those sales because I sold to those customers. And that's the big takeaway there. Just because it's not being funneled through your service department doesn't mean you have to miss the sale altogether. And by the way, all sales help the dealership, right? And so where your the thing you did with the $100 bill, that's perfect. It's perfect. It doesn't matter where it came from. The fact is that it's here and it's on the desk. So that's kind of my takeaway.
Yeah, and
it's super important.
Yeah, one of the other things I was going to say is that one of the factors that has to be looked at here is depreciation of the vehicle itself.
Yeah.
Because in most cases, 3 years down the road, after you drive off the lot, after you buy or lease that car, 3 years later, that car is only worth about half of what the purchase price is. And if you think about it, most people are financing the purchase of a new car 48, 5, 6, sometimes 6, 7 years down, and
sure.
When you think about it, it's like, okay, here I am, I'm still making my same monthly payment 5 or 6 years down the road, but I don't have any warranty. Like the warranty is gone. Anything goes wrong with that car, I have to pay for it out of my pocket.
Yep.
So I'm looking for somewhere that can do the work for, and again, a lot of the technicians that work in these independent repair facilities, guess what? They worked at the dealership. So,
yeah.
And now we're talking about, skill level. So, some of these independents, some of them have a greater bandwidth of what they can do and what they can't do. All of them can do oil changes. All of them can do alignments. All of them can do brake pads. But, at certain points, you're going to be faced with no other alternative than to take it back to the dealer, because now you're talking about, very specific diagnostic and technical type repairs that maybe the independent repair providers don't have either the correct diagnostic equipment or training.
Yeah.
And let's face it, the level of technology being integrated into these cars every single year, it just gets bigger and bigger. And 3 or 4 years, if you have a vehicle, let's say 3, 4, 5 years old, there's a good chance that the technology is maybe obsolete. Not a lot of cars 3 or 4 years ago had Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, as an example.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, so takeaway is it's very important, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're just kind of putting things into perspective, right? Things to think about, and it could be very easy, like, hey, phone rings, I pick it up, I fill the order, and that's it. And I just never liked the McDonald's order taker approach to selling parts, because if you sit there and wait for the phone to ring, that's not how I would recommend to grow your business. There's lots of other ways that we can do it. So
absolutely. Well, I guess let's get into some of those different ways. So you have, like I said earlier, 4 or 5 things we can do to help us develop our wholesale businesses. And so what would be the first thing that you would recommend for us?
Here's the thing, relationships. And I'm going to say that's, when you're talking about the top 3 things that's most important to me, any business, but especially wholesale, is that everything begins and ends with, building and maintaining relationships with your customers, right? The customers who buy from you, and, the next thing would be considered would be service, right? We can have the best relationships in the world with our customers. If we can't service those customers, we got a problem.
That's right.
And then pricing is a distant third. And pricing and being competitive, I mean, Joe, we both know that we can manipulate prices, you know, and many dealers do manipulate prices because either they don't have the relationships or they struggle with the servicing or delivery. And so what's the shortest path? It's, oh, well, if I have mediocre service, then I'm just going to lower my price. I'm going to be the cheapest.
Yeah, exactly.
And as we all know, Joe, you get what you pay for.
You get what you pay for. That's exactly right.
Yeah. And so, you know, parts managers out there, hey, guess what? You don't have to be the cheapest. You just have to be the best. And that's how you grow your business. And so
it absolutely is.
It's going to come down to, you know, have a tool or a measurement that you can look and see from the time that phone rang to the time that part got to the shop, how long did it take? And you know what? Jimmy John's can get that sandwich over there freaky fast and under whatever it is, 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Exactly.
Granted, they only have a 2-mile radius, right?
Right.
But you know what? I'm talking about a $10 sandwich, and I'm comparing it to like a $400 brake job, which, by the way, did not include labor. You add labor onto it, now it's an $800 brake job. Guess what, Joe? That sandwich will win the delivery race every single time.
That's right.
Would you agree with me?
Absolutely. And you know, it kind of brings up a funny point because my wife and I ordered Domino's the other day, and it's so funny. I was looking at I think most places do this now. Like if you have DoorDash and you have all these different things, but when you order Domino's, they give you this little progress bar, and they're like, "Hey, it's being made.
Yeah.
All right, it's being quality checked." And then, "Hey, Mark actually has it in his vehicle, and he's literally 6.25 minutes away from you." And I thought, "Wow, this is incredible. Like, how could we just learn just a little bit from?" And there are tools out there. Actually, there are tools out there that you can sort of use in the same way. But I thought, man, and the crazy thing is that it doesn't matter which Domino's you order from, you're going to get that every single time. The quality is going to be the same. The delivery service is going to be the same. All these different things are going to be the same. And, you know, are you familiar with the work of Simon Sinek?
Absolutely. I follow him on social media. Absolutely.
Yeah. So he talks a lot about, and pretty recently, his latest book is called The Infinite Game, I believe. That's what it's called. But essentially, he draws a comparison between infinite and finite games, meaning a finite game is like playing a game of chess. There's a clear winner and a clear loser. There are predetermined sort of rules and procedures and things you can and cannot do, right? But the other side of the spectrum is that there's this infinite game, and that's the game that we're all playing in, right? And so when we talk about, like you talk a lot about relationships, and it's interesting to me because you're inherently thinking about this from an infinite perspective, right? Because you don't win or lose at the parts business. You're either behind or ahead of someone else. Like that's all it is. There is no finish line. This is an infinite game that we're playing. And so when we talk about these things, it's a long-term strategy. These are not things that you can do, on Monday and expect Friday to be awesome. And I always tell my people, the results of this month are predetermined by the inputs we had 6 months ago. And that's just, I find that to be true time and time again. And I think it's sometimes frustrating, especially for, parts managers out there who they're not really heavy into the wholesale game. Maybe they want to be, but like you said, they're like, wait, I have to do all this work for half of the profits that I would get through my shop. And we kind of went through that, but that's thinking of things in a finite mentality. And what we're saying is, hey, how can we build a business that transcends us when we leave? That's how you leave a legacy and a mark on your business. That's how you grow the business, And if you can build a business that is just booming, even when you're gone, you did something right.
Couldn't agree more. And, I'll say that the end result of what we get is directly proportional to what we do, right?
Right.
Like that stuff just doesn't happen automatically. There's a lot of things that have to be looked at and tweaked, and obviously there's tools out there, and for parts managers out there on the collision side, you're going to want to be on. There's so many platforms that the collision shops are using right now.
Yeah.
That you have to be in it. And I've said this before, being in wholesale, either you're in or you're out. There is no gray area. It's like, it's kind of like being pregnant. Either you're pregnant or you're not. It's like, and if you're gonna be in the business and you're gonna be a player, then you have to have everything that these shops, specifically ordering procurement platforms, Collision Link, OPS tracks, audio orders coming across the fax machine are long gone.
Yeah.
And I remember those days because I've been around for so long, but I remember the orders coming in, and I'd see a crash order, right? And half the order the lines were crossed out. And I'm like, wait a minute, what is this? Like why am I getting the scraps of this order? I want that door. No, I want that headlamp. I want that bumper cover. What do you mean insurance is telling you got to buy it somewhere else, right? So we're talking about that game. And of course, over on the mechanical side, take a good look at RepairLink. The days of customers calling into your parts department, and let's face it, 90% of the inbound phone calls from mechanical shops, they're trying to build a repair estimate. That's all they're trying to do. It's the same thing that our service department does.
Yep.
I need price and availability on this, and this. And guess what? They don't have to call us anymore. I would rather sell parts, and I think you'll agree with me, rather than be a quoting machine and quoting parts all day long, and they never order back from you, right?
Right.
And so in that case, I would gladly set up those shops on RepairLink, and they don't have to call us anymore. They can log in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when we're closed. They can see the diagram, they can see the part, they can see the part number, they can see the list price, they can see their price,
absolutely.
They can see availability, and guess what? If they want to order it, they just click it, we get the order, and we deliver it. How cool is that?
I mean, that's amazing. Exploiting those things is the that's where the money's made, and I'm finding actually that there's a preference that's starting to build. I mean, people don't really want to call me. And that's fine. Like, they want to be able to do self-service. They want to be able to look those things up themselves and build the estimates and have that quick level of access, because, I think a lot of dealerships suffer from just not being able to get to every single phone call. And the reality is that if you don't have sort of a back-end system set up, you might be losing sales. If you're not on RepairLink, Collision Link, OPS tracks, all of these sort of various other pieces of technology that allow your customer to do business with you without talking to them, you could be very well losing sales.
Yeah, on the mechanical side, the last time I checked, up to 50% of repair estimates were written outside of normal dealership business operating hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, it's important to have these things in place. And one other thing that I'll just kind of pepper in here with this conversation is I remember looking at quotes that my people would generate. And I remember having them in a room in a meeting and say, hey, we had whatever it was, 1,000 quotes this month, right? And they're sitting in my DMS system, and they're just sitting there and they're open. And I never really liked having those things sitting there open, especially at the end of the month, right?
Yeah.
And then I would focus like, okay, so what percentage of those quotes? Because after all, that's time. I'm paying my people time to pick up the phone and do those quotes.
Sure.
So I want to know what percentage of those quotes actually ended up getting sold. And it turned out it was like less than 2%. So then I was like, well, this is crazy. Like like our time could be better well spent rather than just answering phone calls and quoting parts all day long so they can go buy it somewhere else, right?
Exactly.
And so parts managers, make sure you measure what percentage of quotes are actually being sold. And, if you can bump it from 2% to 4%, well, at least that's a step in the right direction, right? But it also sends the message to your employees and also to your customers, like, if you guys like to call us, that's fine. You can call us, right? But you don't have to call us, because there's technology and there's platforms out there that, you could probably get the information much quicker than it would take for you. Because let's face it, I hate to say it, if we made mystery phone calls, which I used to do into parts departments, 9 times out of 10, I get parts hold.
Yep.
Right. And,
yep.
And guess what, people, you don't have to put them on hold anymore. You just have them direct them to your online site, and they get everything they need and then some, and all the information they need to build a repair estimate, and you're off to the races. And that's just a huge time saver. So
absolutely. We had a system set up at one point when we were in a really high growth phase. You end up getting yourself in a position where it's kind of a transition period where it's like, okay, well, we have a certain amount of staff. Let's say you have 10 people, and all of a sudden, of course, it seems like overnight, and it's not. It's all the inputs that you put in before, but it seems like, holy crap, like we have so much to do now. We have so many calls coming in. We have so many emails coming in, all this different stuff, but we're still operating on a smaller staff. And of course, if you're going to your dealer principal and say, hey, I need to hire people, he's going to say, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. You need to be able to justify those things first. So the reality is that you're going to have to develop some really solid processes for inbound sales coming in. And so we had set up a system at one point where we had our receptionist, we had so many calls coming in. We had a receptionist sort of set up what was it? It was kind of like a digital board, mm-hmm. where she would field the calls, say, hey, this is, such and such. What are you looking for? Give me all the information. I'm going to have someone call you back in no more than 10 minutes. And we used that very successfully. And the customer was like, oh, okay. And they started to expect that. And of course, after that, we brought on some more outside sales staff, brought on some more inside sales staff, coached them to be able to use the online platforms and all that kind of stuff. But, there are going to be those transition periods where it feels like it's too much. And we probably feel that way a lot of the time anyway. We're mm-hmm. for some mm-hmm. reason consistently understaffed or have not so great processes, in place. But, it's thinking outside of the box, and you're not letting your customer down. You're letting them down more if you put them on hold for that 10 minutes, right? Without coming back and going, okay, now what are you looking for? And they have to restart the whole process.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question, Joe. If by some miracle you were able to increase your wholesale sales by 20%, would you automatically be assured of getting additional resources or staffing?
That's a good question.
And there is no right or wrong answer. What I'm getting at is that the answer is probably going to be no, right?
I would think,
but I'm doing 20% more business.
Not.
Right. So now here we are. Like, it's a good problem to have. Not that it's a problem, but we're doing more business. We're selling more parts. We're making more money. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be able to add on here, there, or wherever we need, whether it's another person or another program or another driver or.
Yeah.
So it really is dependent on making sure that we're getting the most efficiency out of those platforms that we have, because we want to work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, absolutely. And that part of that is these systems we're talking about, these online platforms, and educating our customers, which, by the way, is a great way to build a relationship with a customer.
Yep, absolutely. One of the things I will say is that there's a lot of things in the pot here. There's a lot of things going on with wholesale. There's going to come a time where a parts manager is going to need some help, right? Like whether it's a little bit of help or a lot of help or all somewhere in between. And you know, I can't stress enough, because you know, when I used to work for these two OEMs, my job was to help coach and train and show best practices. And you know, there's always a nugget there where, or a time where the parts manager would, we call it the aha moment. It's like, oh yeah. And you know, at the end of the day, it's all about measurable increases, right? But
Right.
I guess what I wanted to stress is that, you know, there are resources and there are people and that do this type of thing, whether it's remote, whether it's in person, or a combination of both, where, you know, it's always nice to have a teacher or a coach or some outside, you know, I call it another set of eyes to look at your business. And because sometimes we have tunnel vision, don't we?
That's right. That's right. It's all about a perspective.
Yeah, well, you know, you have somebody who can look at things objectively, and they don't have, you know, because let's face it, there's so many things going on, there's so many distractions, and right now I'm reading a book called Miracle Morning, or Morning Miracle, and it's all about like having a time before you even start your day where you get up early in the morning and you have a moment of reflection, and you can, you know, journal and you can meditate, and you're free of distractions. Because what happens when you get into the dealership, and there's a fire drill happening every hour on the hour, phones are ringing, people, you know, you're being stretched in literally a million different directions, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't leave a lot of bandwidth to be able to sit down in a quiet room to be able to analyze and look at things. And so, you know, one of the things I would recommend to a parts manager is like, look at your portfolio of customers, and let's get that information downloaded into a spreadsheet, and let's sort the customers who have purchased the most year over year. We're going to call those people our biggest winners. And then we're going to also look at the other side, the flip side of that, down at the bottom. These are the biggest losers. These are the people that have, you know, the most amount of sales that they didn't buy from us compared to the same time period last year. And many times that's just an eye opener to the parts manager. And the next logical step would be, you know, getting back that lost business, right? And so what I meant to say is that, you know, you having a good CRM, we talked about this before, a customer relationship management tool, is a must-have. If a dealership doesn't have a CRM, you need to have one, and that Absolutely. Is because right now what we're doing is we're data mining, right? And it's not so much to know like, hey, I'm getting automatic notifications. Here's a customer in my top 5 that I haven't seen or heard of, or they haven't bought anything in the last 10 days. Why? So
yeah,
I want to know. Because let's face it, we have so many customers. It's hard to keep track of them all, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, you know, you've got to aggregate that stuff. And like you said, you can. So I think you and I both use PSX, right, from Summit Consulting.
Correct.
And with PSX, and you know, I think, and you would be able to tell me this, do they work with CDK very well? Do they work with Reynolds?
Yes, they do.
Okay, perfect. So that's good to know. And PSX is one of those systems, and probably it's the best one that I probably know of, where you can set these things up and say, hey, my top customer hasn't ordered from me in 10 days. Whoa, what's going on?
Yeah,
and like you're saying,
well, that's
might not know that otherwise.
That's one little nugget that the system will tell you. But the other thing is, let's take a look at the customer who they're still buying from you every day, but their annual purchases are down maybe 20, 30%. Well, you'll be able to use this tool to say, well, what part segment did they increase or decrease? And in the case of a body shop, I can almost guarantee you it's going to be those highly competitive parts segments of sheet metal, headlamps, tail lamps, radiators, condensers, and those things add up over time, where you're like, okay, now I know why this customer, they're still buying from me, right? They're just not buying as much. So, having that type of information is vital to be able to sell deeper into that account or deeper into that repair estimate. And, it could be a simple fix where it's just like, okay, looks like you guys are getting a lot of pressure from the insurance company to put aftermarket or recycled parts back on that car. But did you know I have a price matching program that's sponsored by the manufacturer that I can price match? And so what does that mean to you, Mr. Customer? It means that you can put the first line OEM part on the car with 100%. It's guaranteed 100% to fit. It's going to have reduced repair cycle time, which is going to save us all money and time. And it's going to mean safer OEM repairs for the customer. So it's a win-win-win situation. And absolutely, I can still sell it because the insurance company doesn't care. They really don't care what kind of part goes on that car. They only care about what they pay.
Exactly. And that shows your customer how much you care about that business.
Oh yeah. I mean, not just the business, but hey, it's so important that the customer knows, like, hey, and I'll say this to my customers, my only purpose in life is to help you sell the next job, or to provide a safer repair for your customer. And you don't have to use that aftermarket or junkyard stuff. You don't have to use it.
Right.
Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Whatever, there's certain parameters or gray areas that the shops can work with. But I can tell you, every single shop I've ever visited, and I've visited thousands of shops over my years, they would rather always use OEM parts. So
yeah, they would, absolutely. And they may think that is not always possible, and in some cases maybe it's not. But most manufacturers, most OEMs are going to offer you some kind of program to help you with your wholesale business. They're going to offer some kind of back-end incentive, some kind of incentive for your customer. Knowing those things is just critically important, because when you look at your wholesale business as just one singular business unit, you have to take those things into account. If you're looking at your financial statement, you're going, okay, wholesale revenue is this, wholesale gross is this. Oh crap, I'm not making any money. Well, you have to take into account all of that back end stuff that, well, number one, maybe you're not taking advantage of to the fullest extent. And number two, maybe you're not offering your customer all of the incentives that the OEM provides for them, because they want you to sell OEM parts. Trust me, they would much prefer that you, we talked about this earlier, if it's not coming through the shop, they want you to sell that part versus having the customer go to an aftermarket source, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
yeah, I just think it's important that we take all of those things into account.
Yeah, well, here's the other thing is, like, I'm sure those all those highly competitive parts that we spoke of, I can almost guarantee you they're probably sitting on your shelf. Because you've sold them before, and you know what? I would rather make $10 on that part and move it and get it off the shelf, rather than have that thing sit there for a year and collect dust. And now, like I said, I'm all about volume. I'm all about sales.
Yep.
Inventory control is very important, but like I said before, I do not want to be the curator of the auto parts museum.
I'm gonna end up using that now. I'm gonna have to start using that in my normal everyday language.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Well,
these parts sitting here on the shelf, these are hot potatoes.
That's right. Exactly.
I need it. They're landing. We got a lot of parts coming in every day. We got a lot of parts going out every day. These parts are hot potatoes, and the more time they sit here collecting dust, the more money I'm losing. So, you know what? If I can move that part, trust me, I will.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, James, I know that you have said this before, but if anyone does need help, of course, I'm more than willing to help you work through this. But I know that, at least I'm pretty sure that James is willing as well, and he is he is what I would consider the expert on this. So how can people reach you?
That's a great question. I'm right in the middle of putting together my website where people can, at least look and see what's going on with me and what my portfolio looks like and what my experience looks like. But right now, the easiest way to get a hold of me is just on LinkedIn, James Holloway, and message me there. But very soon, there will be a time where you can call me, you can text me, you can FaceTime me, you can email me, all of those things. I'm always here. I'm always available. I love to talk about this because I'll be honest with you, I don't know anything else.
Hey,
I've
that's
been
where
doing
I'm
this
at.
for a long time. Yeah. Yeah. And I get a lot of self-satisfaction from being able to help others. It used to be where I got a lot of satisfaction from just being able to help customers, but now it's about helping parts managers. And in all of the hundreds of dealerships I've traveled to all over the country, and when I say all over, Joe, I've seen all these dealerships, the best of the best, the worst of the worst, and all points in between. Some of these dealers are they're multi-million-dollar, what I call mega dealers, and some are just like small dealers. And guess what? None of them are perfect. And there's always one thing that they like I said before, it's an aha moment or something that they can improve on. Because I like to ask questions. I will play devil's advocate, and I won't make it easy for that person. I will actually challenge them and say, here's what I see. Let's talk about it, and let's get to the bottom of it and perform sometimes what they call a SWOT, a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats analysis.
Sure.
Doesn't have to be a big thing, but there's always a reason why something happens or it doesn't happen, right?
Of course.
LinkedIn for now, yeah, until I get this thing launched up, and yeah, so
Good. Well, do you have any parting words for us? Anything that we should be looking out for? Anything that we should be taking away from our conversation today?
I mean, yeah. Remember the 3-4-legged, stool, right? And we didn't even talk about e-commerce. That's another topic for another day.
Sure.
Otherwise, I'll be here all day long talking about that because I have a lot of experience with selling parts. There were a time that we sold parts on eBay 10 years ago. I can tell you stories about that. But in terms of wholesale, I'm just going to put a couple bullet points if you guys want to scribble it down. Number one, build those relationships. Number two, make sure that you're giving the very best level of service that you can. And listen, you don't have to conquer the entire continent of Europe or the United States. Focus on your backyard, right? I'm going to say own your backyard. When I'm talking about your backyard, I'm talking about a 5 to 7 mile radius, right?
Yeah.
And make sure that we're competitive and profitable. Nobody expects you to be the cheapest, right? We sell OEM parts. Those OEM parts have a warranty. And those OEM parts do have a place just like aftermarket parts do. And then the other thing I will say is that, get back to lost business. Get yourself a CRM tool. Start looking at your portfolio. Okay. Find out who those people are that kind of wandered off the radar. That CRM is actually your radar, right?
Yeah.
It's so important to have what we call customer retention, right? So we're going to get back the lost business. We're going to sell deeper into the accounts we already have. We're going to do those things before we even attempt to go out and conquest new customers. And there are plenty of shops out there that will consider switching over to your dealership. They just don't know you. Because I will tell you this right now, ladies and gentlemen, people buy from people. They don't buy from brands. They don't buy from corporations, they don't buy from logos, they buy from people, and you have to earn their trust, and that takes time. So, if you have a couple of prospects, there's no better time to get out there and make introductions and make sure they're aware of your capabilities, the tools and resources that will benefit them. This is not about you. This is about your customer and how you can help them fix more cars. Because your customer, it's like running a restaurant. That table in that restaurant, if I can turn that table 2 more times a night than I did the night before, then that's going to make a huge impact on my business. The average mechanical repair shop out there has anywhere from 2 to 4 repair bays. So if I can help that shop push an extra car out a week, that's 5 extra cars a month that they're pushing out because I showed up, I'm helping them, I'm showing them all the tools. Anyway, that extra 5 cars a month is huge in terms of their growth, their potential, and what they take to the bank, right? So,
yeah.
And the other thing is that customer retention, sell deeper into the accounts you already have, get back the lost business, and that's about it. I mean, of course, we can go on and on and on, but the CRM is vitally important, and it's not just about having it. It's about logging in every day and looking at it and taking a good hard look at it, because a lot of information goes in every single day, and things can change very quickly. So
that's right. That's right. And James, I'll say this, I think we could both probably talk forever about this. And I think it's such an important conversation to be having. And I think it would be great if we continue to collaborate and go deeper on all of these subjects, because I know that there's going to be some people, some driven people, some people who want change. They're going to want to explore this a little bit. And, this is the year, folks. You need to start planting your seeds now, because it takes a while. It takes a while. It doesn't happen overnight. We talked earlier about infinite and finite games. Well, you have to think about this as an infinite game. So take these lessons, go a bit deeper, do some reflection of your own, and we will be back together hopefully soon, James.
Absolutely.
Good.
Again, you and I think we're on the same page here, where we want to provide value to our listeners and make sure that try to give them some food for thought.
Absolutely. Well, James, thank you so much for doing this. This has been awesome. I'm taking a lot of notes. So we will talk to you again very, very soon.
Sounds great. And thank you again. I have a lot of fun being on this podcast, and I look forward to the next time.